Still Single Stories, Toni's Business. The pastor said turn to Song of Solomon chapter 8 verse 4. But instead Toni opened her mobile banking app and stared at her bank balance. It read £408.14. She found it impossible to save because she loved buying new clothes. For the past few months she was considering leaving her job as a financial advisor to become an interior designer. But she couldn't see past how unwise it would be to do such a thing. She loved being a Christian, but sometimes she struggled to understand the difference between faith and foolishness. Toni thought back to the time she got her current job. She had a ferocious cold. They gave her a short test, and she made so many crossings out that you would think a toddler scribbled on the paper. Then when it was time for her to speak to the panel, she got her legs stuck in the chair. The interview questions weren't difficult, but had she been feeling better, she would have performed better. Toni had reached the end of her tether after that interview and vowed it was the end of her applying for any more roles. Later that evening, she slumped on the sofa, reached for her laptop and began to look for volunteering opportunities abroad. Her face gleamed when she came across a volunteering program called International Citizen Service, where she would have the opportunity to go to Bolivia free of charge for 3 months. What did I have to lose? Toni thought. It wasn't like I had a husband and kids. She was already behind in life, as some would argue, in comparison to her peers. But what was 3 months of travelling going to do? She thought about her childhood, especially when she was in primary school. Everyone had the same class, did the same subjects, wore the same school uniform. Everything was the same for everyone. Then before you know it, your peers are way ahead of you, with high-paying jobs, families and property, and you're often the only one left on the boat. Toni knew that even though life felt like a sprint where her friends took off running without her, she knew she had to run her own race and not let comparison hinder her. She owed it to herself to make the most of what she had in front of her, despite all the rejections. So she took a deep breath, silenced her fears, and applied for the volunteering opportunity, and was accepted a week later. It was nice to see an email that didn't read, "Unfortunately, on this occasion you have been unsuccessful." She began to picture herself teaching children in a school millions of miles away from England. The same day she received the email from the volunteering scheme, she got a phone call from the recruiter who set up the awful interview. She asked Toni how she felt the interview went, a question that she despised. Why would you ask someone how the interview went? As if she had the power to hire herself. Within minutes, she had been offered the role. Isn't it funny how 5 years of waiting, 5 years of rejections, 5 years of working in retail just changed in a 5-minute conversation? The job offer suddenly felt bittersweet. A day ago she had no opportunities, and now here she was faced with 2 opportunities. After some prayer and reflection, she accepted the job offer. Fast forward a year later, the world of financial advising was neither here nor there. She didn't love it, nor did she hate it. Isn't that life though? You want something so badly, and when you get it, it doesn't fulfill you like you thought it would. Toni had taken an interest in interior design recently. She created countless vision boards on Pinterest and watched vlogs on YouTube of how people decorated and designed spaces. She had begun experimenting with her room and changed it to a tropical style beach house room. It was her way of brightening up her life in contrast to the dullness of London living. Upon seeing her room, her friend Laju convinced her to decorate the house she recently bought. Laju's guests had begun requesting Toni's services once they saw the place. Toni was flattered, but this hobby was still very new to her, and she wasn't ready to begin taking on clients. She doubted herself. Could she really do this as a job? Her overthinking would drive her crazy. Secretly, she struggled to trust God and step out in faith. She'd like to know plans. She didn't like surprises and hated this about herself. This fear-driven attitude was like a tornado that spun and knocked down every aspect of her life. She wouldn't take on new projects at work because she didn't know what to expect. She had never been in a relationship because the fear of opening up to someone made her anxious. Being single was much more comfortable and predictable. So when faced with the opportunity of leaving her job to start a business, she didn't think she had the guts to do it. It just wasn't in her nature. She let her mind wander throughout the service and completely paid no attention to the preaching. As soon as the worship team sang the last song, she was the first person to start heading towards the door. She didn't care for unnecessary pleasantries and social interaction, but before she could make an exit, an older lady cornered her and shared a word with her. She told her that God wanted her to know that she can walk on water, that she can step out in faith like Peter. Toni so desperately wanted to walk on water, but the fear of failing frightened her.